You know that strange moment when someone says something so bold, so crazy specific, that you literally pause whatever you're doing and just stare at the screen for a second? That was me when Tom Lee opened his mouth and dropped a prediction that felt less like financial analysis and more like a quiet warning to anyone holding XRP. And I don't know why, maybe it was the tone of his voice, maybe it was the timing, but something about what he said didn't feel like regular market talk. Felt like he was signaling, like he was trying to tell people, hey, something big is coming, and most of you aren't ready for it. See, Tom Lee isn't some hype merchant on Twitter. He's not a random influencer looking for engagement. He's not chasing clicks. This is the guy who has built his entire career on two things: spotting asymmetric opportunities and being right when everyone else thinks he's insane. He's the same analyst who called the stock market bottom in 2009 when people were literally crying on live TV. He's the same analyst who predicted Bitcoin's ridiculous 2017 run when traditional finance was laughing at crypto as a toy for nerds. And now he's talking about XRP in a way that doesn't sound casual at all. But let me tell you the part that really got me. He didn't talk about charts. He didn't talk about hype cycles. He didn't talk about the Fed or recessions or any of the usual things analysts throw around when they want to sound smart. He talked about infrastructure. He talked about utility. He talked about macro timing. He talked about regulatory alignment. And the way he connected those four, bro, it hits different. Especially when you're someone who's been holding XRP through the FUD, through the lawsuits, through the sideways markets, through the XRP is dead Twitter comments. The man basically said, 2026 is the year everything aligns. And when he said it, it didn't feel like a guess. Felt like he knew. Let's be honest with each other for a second. Everyone in crypto loves to dream. Everybody wants that one moment, that explosive, life-changing, I told you so moment. But most predictions don't feel grounded. They're emotional. They're wishful. But Tom Lee's breakdown? It wasn't emotional at all. It was structured. It was quiet. It was almost uncomfortable because of how cold the logic was. The core of his argument was simple. When regulatory clarity meets real-world demand, the assets designed for global financial plumbing will move first and move hard. And which asset is literally architected to be financial plumbing? Exactly. XRP. Now, here's where the story gets even more uncomfortable. Tom Lee pointed to something most people completely ignore: timelines. Not crypto timelines. Institutional timelines. Banks. Payment networks. Settlement systems. Liquidity hubs. These things don't move fast, they move in cycles of 3 to 7 years. Guess when the current modernization cycle ends? 2025 to 2026. The ISO 20022 transition? Final stability phase in 2025. Ripple's global partnerships? Most multi-year pilot agreements end between 2025 and 2026. U.S. crypto regulation? 2 critical frameworks are scheduled for completion in 2025. Do you see the pattern? Tom Lee wasn't predicting hype. He was predicting timing. And when you look deeper, his message becomes almost frighteningly clear. The assets that have been suppressed, slowed down, or ignored due to regulatory uncertainty will be the first to surge once the system flips. Tell me that doesn't sound like XRP's entire story. Tell me that doesn't sound like the past 10 years of waiting, building, testing, fighting the SEC, surviving every kind of fear narrative, only for 2026 to become the year the shackles finally fall off. But the part that really sat heavily in my chest was this. Tom Lee said most investors won't be prepared because they will expect the move to come slowly, gradual, predictable, like a stock market cycle. But infrastructures don't move gradually. They switch. It's binary. It's off, then on. That's why he warned people in a way that made the whole crypto community sit up. When the new liquidity rails come online, the assets connected to them won't rise slowly. They'll reprice. Reprice. A word like that should scare you and excite you at the same time. Because here's what that means. It's not about XRP slowly crawling from $0.50 to $1 to $1.50. It's about XRP being fundamentally revalued because its role in the global system changed overnight. A system upgrade. A liquidity shift. a new settlement framework, and suddenly the price reflects the infrastructure, not the speculation. That's what 2026 represents in Tom Lee's perspective. Not a hype cycle, not a bull market wave, but a structural pivot. And if you're holding XRP right now, if you've been patient, disciplined, frustrated, confused, hopeful, everything all at once, you might be closer to that moment than you think. Because Tom Lee didn't just give a prediction, he gave a roadmap. He basically said, watch the institutional cycle, watch the regulatory finalization, watch the liquidity corridors, watch 2026. And it doesn't matter what side of the XRP argument you're on, bull or bear, you cannot argue with the macro calendar. You cannot argue with global finance timelines. You cannot argue with the fact that XRP is literally the asset positioned at the center of cross-border payments, liquidity management, and real-time settlement. But here's the deeper truth people don't want to admit. Most investors won't make life-changing money from XRP. Not because XRP won't move, but because they won't be holding when it does. Tom Lee's message was a quiet slap in the face. Be early, not reactive. And if he's right, if 2026 is the year XRP finally takes the role it was engineered for, then this isn't just another crypto prediction. This might actually be the moment that changes your entire financial future if you're holding XRP today. There's a moment every true crypto investor experiences. That deep, unsettling whisper inside your chest that tells you, something big is coming. You can't explain it. You can't prove it. But you can feel it. And that feeling becomes 10 times louder when someone like Tom Lee steps into the conversation and starts pointing at the exact things you've been secretly noticing but couldn't articulate. It's like having a veteran pilot walk into the cockpit, stare out the window and say, yeah, the storm you're seeing? It's real. And it's coming fast. That's the energy Tom Lee brought when he started dissecting XRP's future. And we're going to dig into the exact logic behind his position, the part most people don't see, don't understand, or don't want to believe. Because here's the truth. Most investors think they're analyzing crypto, but they're actually analyzing price action, not purpose. Tom Lee? He analyzes systems, cycles, infrastructure, macro triggers, liquidity migration, regulatory velocity, institutional pressure points. He's looking at the chessboard while everyone else is staring at one little pawn. So let's zoom out with him. Tom Lee's biggest point, and honestly the scariest one, is that markets do not move on technology. They move on permission. You can have the best asset in the world, the fastest settlement time, the cleanest tokenomics. None of it matters until the system says, okay, now you're allowed to operate. And here's where it gets wild. We're entering a period where global regulators are not only clarifying crypto frameworks, they're synchronizing them. Europe, the US, Singapore, Japan, UK, Middle East, Africa's digital payment corridors. For the first time, the world is aligning on digital asset rules. Not perfectly, not beautifully, but structurally. Tom Lee's view? When regulatory clarity locks into place, and he expects the major pieces to complete between late 2025 and mid-2026, assets connected to real financial infrastructure will reprice instantly. Not gradually, not emotionally, not like hype coins. Instantly. Because once the system gives the green light, utility has no choice but to turn on. And that's where XRP stands alone. XRP is not a meme. XRP is not a hype token. XRP is not a new experiment. XRP is infrastructure, a settlement layer, a liquidity bridge, a cross-border engine. And regulation is the key that unlocks the engine. Tom Lee basically said, XRP's biggest catalyst was never winning the SEC case. Its biggest catalyst will be global regulatory consistency. That's when banks can move. People underestimate timelines. People underestimate cycles. But not Tom Lee. Guess where the world is with crypto-based settlement and cross-border payments. Look around. SWIFT is completing ISO 20022 harmonization. Ripple has over 100+ private institutional corridors in progress. CBDC pilots are maturing. Tokenized assets are moving from theory to production. Banks are shifting from exploration to implementation. Tom Lee sees that institutionally, 2026 is the pivot year. This is when systems go live. Payments modernize. Old rails turn off. New rails turn on. Liquidity shifts from legacy corridors to digital native rails. And who sits at the center of this transformation? XRP. This is why Tom Lee's tone was so calm yet so unsettling, because he wasn't talking about price as an emotion. He was talking about inevitability. This is the part nobody wants to discuss, but Tom Lee went straight into it. The global financial system is choking. Cross-border payments? Outdated. Expensive. Slow. Settlement layers? Clogged. Fragmented. Liquidity management? Bleeding money. FX corridors? Overcomplicated. Banking rails? 60 years old. In Tom Lee's view, the next major financial shift won't be about investment. It will be about necessity. When a system becomes too slow, too costly, too inefficient, it doesn't evolve because people want it to evolve. It evolves because it has to. And that is where XRP becomes the perfect key for a door the world is finally ready to open. He literally said, when the global financial system feels pressure, it won't pick the newest technology. It will pick the most proven one. And what is XRP? Not new. Not experimental. Not fragile. Not changing its purpose every 6 months. XRP is the most battle-tested settlement asset in crypto. It's the asset with the longest institutional track record, the most real-world pilots, the fastest settlement times, the lowest energy footprint, the most regulatory scrutiny, the most stable issuance structure, the most predictable liquidity design. This is exactly why Tom Lee believes XRP's moment is not hype-driven. It's structurally inevitable. This is where his prediction becomes uncomfortable. Tom Lee believes most investors will miss the XRP move because it will come during a period of boredom. A period where the market is quiet, sideways, frustrating, exhausting, filled with doubt, filled with complaints, filled with influencers screaming that XRP is a dead coin. He said something that hit me hard. The big moves never happen when people expect them. They happen when people have given up. And think about it. Every major XRP surge in history happened during low sentiment. Every major shift in crypto happened when people got tired. Every institutional breakthrough happens quietly, behind the scenes, without hype. By the time retail investors see the candles, institutional corridors are already activated. This is why Tom Lee keeps repeating that one word: repricing. Not pumping. Not mooning. Repricing. A system recalculating the value of an asset because its job changed. That is not speculation. That is structural transformation. And for XRP holders, especially the disciplined ones, the patient ones, the ones who've been mocked for years, that transformation could be the moment that flips everything in 2026. There's something deeply human about longing for confirmation. That one voice, that one expert, that one insight that makes you stop and say, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm actually seeing this correctly. Because the truth is, being early feels a lot like being wrong. And XRP holders have lived in that space for years. Years of doubt. Years of attacks. Years of being joked about. Years of watching newer projects get attention while the one with the most institutional potential sat in limbo, frozen by someone else's narrative. But Tom Lee, he doesn't play that game. He doesn't chase hype. He doesn't care about Twitter noise. He doesn't care about tribalism. He cares about structure, about what actually moves markets. And what he revealed about XRP is the kind of thing that hits you in the gut because you suddenly realize the world is a lot closer to shifting than anyone is prepared to admit. So let's go even deeper into the part nobody talks about, the silent alignment happening behind the scenes. Because while everyone is arguing about price targets and moonshots, Tom Lee is looking at the boring stuff. The stuff that real investors pay attention to. The stuff that actually forces an asset to explode. The first truth: XRP's value doesn't come from hype. IT comes from friction. Friction is the hidden cost in global finance. You don't see it, but you feel it everywhere. Delayed payments, broken correspondent banking chains, expensive international transfers, settlement failures, frozen capital, FX inefficiencies, liquidity traps. The legacy banking system bleeds trillions every year because of friction. And Tom Lee made something very clear. The asset that removes the most friction will capture the most value. That's not a slogan. That's not marketing. That's a mathematical truth. So when he looked at XRP, he wasn't asking, how fast can the price go up? He was asking, how much global friction is XRP actually designed to eliminate? And when you look at it that way, everything changes. Because XRP doesn't have to take over the world. It doesn't need 100% market dominance. It doesn't need every bank on Earth. All it needs is a fraction of global settlement friction. Just a fraction of remittance flows, treasury movements, cross-border corridors, institutional liquidity, private payment rails, CBDC interoperability, tokenized assets settling in real time. A fraction of $1 trillion inefficiency is still a multi-hundred billion dollar valuation event. And that's where Tom Lee's conviction comes from. Not hope, not hype, not tribal loyalty, but numbers. Tom Lee said something that most influencers completely ignore. Price is not driven by supply. It's driven by liquidity architecture. And in that category, XRP is almost alone. Bitcoin is a store of value. Ethereum is a programmable chain. Solana is a high-throughput system. HBAR is trust layer infrastructure. But XRP, it's a liquidity instrument. Meaning, it wasn't built to sit still. It was built to move quickly, efficiently, globally. Tom Lee noticed something that many retail investors overlook. XRP has one of the most controlled, transparent, and predictable distribution schedules of any major asset. There's no chaotic minting, no random inflation events, no governance battles, no surprise supply injections. It's one of the few assets where long-term liquidity modeling actually works. Institutions love that. Banks love that. Markets love that. The world loves predictability, even more than innovation. This is exactly why Tom Lee believes XRP is positioned like a financial instrument, not a speculative asset. Think about that for a moment. How many cryptos can say that? The third truth. XRP is not late. It's right on time. Crypto culture has this obsession with speed. Why isn't it pumping? Why isn't it mooning yet? Why hasn't it done a 10x? Why isn't it moving like SOL? People forget something critical. Financial infrastructure is slow on purpose. But when it moves permanently. Tom Lee explained this by pointing to the internet. The internet was invented long before it became commercial. Commercial long before it became mainstream. Mainstream long before it became life or death infrastructure. Innovation always follows this pattern. Build, test, integrate, approve, deploy, scale. And XRP is at the end of this cycle, not the beginning. This is why he believes 2026 is not just a prediction year, it's a transition year. Because that's when multiple macro events collide. Institutional frameworks finalize. Bank pilots mature. Tokenization reaches scale. FX corridors digitize. Settlement systems modernize. Global payment rails converge. CBDC networks interconnect. Regulatory clarity locks in. You can't stop that. You can't slow it down. You can't reverse it. It's directionally locked. And who sits at the center of that transition? XRP, the one asset built from day one to solve the exact problem the system is finally ready to fix. That's not luck. That's design. And this is the part Tom Lee was brutally honest about. Most investors will not understand XRP until it's too late. Not because the information isn't available. Not because the signs aren't clear. But because humans only believe narratives after price confirms them. It's human nature. We trust movement more than logic. We trust candles more than data. We trust emotion more than analysis. We trust FOMO more than fundamentals. This is why major market shifts always shock the majority. Tom Lee said it perfectly. By the time the world realizes XRP's role, the upside will already be priced in. And that right there, that single sentence is the entire thesis. XRP won't pump because influencers talk about it. It won't pump because a rumor spreads. It won't pump because retail is excited. It will reprice because the system needs it. And when that day arrives, when banks switch from testing to running, when corridors open, when liquidity starts flowing, the people who held through the quiet years will experience a moment unlike anything they've lived through before. The moment where patience becomes profit. The moment where doubt becomes proof. The moment where every "you're crazy" turns into "how did you know?" That's the moment Tom Lee is preparing for. And if you're holding XRP in 2026, he believes that moment is coming straight toward you. There's a specific kind of calm that hits you when everything finally starts to make sense. When all the scattered signs, all the quiet updates, all the institutional movements, all the regulatory shifts suddenly come together like puzzle pieces falling into place. That's what Tom Lee unlocked for XRP holders. Not hype, not fantasy, not blind optimism, but clarity. Because the truth is, most investors have been waiting for a moment, a signal, a confirmation that their patience hasn't been wasted. And Tom Lee basically walked in and said, "You're early, you're right, and the world is about to catch up to what you already see." And that's why this matters so much. Because XRP in 2026 isn't about a pump. It's not about a bull market. It's not about speculation. It's about a system that has quietly been preparing to shift for over a decade, and is finally reaching the moment where everything starts moving at once. The regulatory alignment, the institutional adoption, the liquidity corridors, the tokenization wave, the settlement crisis, the modernization of global payments, the shift from testing to deployment, the quiet, behind-the-scenes decisions that never make it to Twitter but move billions in the real world. This is why Tom Lee speaks so confidently, not because he sees XRP as a gamble, but because he sees it as a necessary component of the next financial architecture. And the wildest part? Most people won't believe any of this until after it happens. But you, the person listening to this, you're not most people. You're someone who pays attention. You're someone who understands cycles. You're someone who can feel when something big is vibrating beneath the surface. And you're someone who refuses to sleepwalk through history while the financial world rewires itself. So here's the final truth. 2026 isn't the year XRP becomes something new. It's the year the world finally realizes what XRP already is. And if you're holding now, if you're standing firm through the noise, through the disbelief, through the sideways months and quiet consolidation, then you are positioning yourself for one of the most misunderstood but powerful moments in digital asset history. Now, if this resonated, if this spoke to that part of you that knows what's coming, then here's what you need to do. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay close, because this channel isn't here to hype you. It's here to prepare you. And if you think this video was powerful, wait until you see what's coming next. The story of XRP isn't ending. It's barely getting started.